Hey everyone, this is Jesse with OV Innovations. This video is going to cover the installation of our FILBE-to-ALICE adapter kit. This kit allows a USMC Pack shoulder harness to attach to a standard issue ALICE frame or a Eureka Molding PALICE frame. The kit comes in two styles, one for adapting just the shoulder harness to an ALICE frame, and the other for adapting the complete FILBE Main Pack system to such a frame. That system is comprised of a shoulder harness, hip belt, and main bag. The kit allows a shoulder harness to be placed at different heights on an ALICE frame to accommodate users with different torso lengths, but it does not allow a shoulder harness to be placed above the top of the frame in the so-called long torso configuration. This video will cover the installation of the complete main pack kit, and in doing so we'll cover the installation of the shoulder harness only kit as well. The kit is comprised of the following components: 1 harness adapter, 2 side release buckle straps, 1 horizontal strap, 1 angled horizontal strap, 2 vertical straps, 2 bag straps, 1 ladder lock, and 5 tri-glides. If your kit is for the shoulder harness only, it will not include 2 of the bag straps or 4 of the tri-glides. If you are attaching your kit to a Eureka Molding PALICE frame, there are 2 differences in the attachment process that you will need to be aware of. The vertical attachment straps, as well as the bag straps, are attached differently on this frame. It is recommended that you watch the standard installation procedure for each of these components without following along, and then looking at the end of the video at the Eureka Molding specific segment for the instructions on how to attach these 2 components correctly. To begin, we're going to start with our hip belt laid out as such with all the straps undone. We're going to have our ALICE frame and also 4 of the tri-glides. We're going to take this center vertical strap and we're just going to fasten it to itself. We're going to first go through these 2 oval loops, and then we're going to go back through just 1 single loop that's going to be farther from the webbing end. And then when we're tightening this, if you just pull this strap tight like this, you'll find that it's quite difficult to get it secure. And so what we want to do is just feed some of the free webbing in through like that, and then pull it tight. And we'll repeat that throughout the installation procedure as we encounter this hardware. From here, we're going to take one of our tri-glides, and we're going to feed one of the 4 horizontal straps through the outer opening on this tri-glide, such that there's a free opening on the inside that points towards the center of the belt. And we're going to repeat this for all 4 straps. Again, the other side is just going to be mirrored from how we had it on the first side, so that there's a free opening that points towards the inside of the belt. From here, we can take our ALICE frame and position it roughly over the center of the hip belt's plastic stiffener. This plastic stiffener is a little bit wider than the ALICE frame is, and as such, you end up with, when the belt's centered, about 3/8 of an inch on each side of the belt's plastic stiffener. And so we don't need to worry too much about getting this perfectly centered at this point, because we're going to move it around, but we want to be conscious of where the hip belt's going to end up when it's attached. So to begin, we're going to take one of these free webbing straps, and it's going to go through that large oval loop that's on the ALICE frame where the lumbar pad normally attaches. It's going to go around that loop and then back through that open end of the tri-glide that was unoccupied when we began this process. And it's going to look something like this if it's attached correctly. And so it goes around the ALICE frame's large oval loop there, and then back through that free oval loop. And then we don't need to pull it tight, but we could just snug that down. We're going to repeat the same thing below here, through that oval loop, through the free opening on the tri-glide, and snug it down. So one side complete should look like that, and we'll then repeat this for the other side. I actually attached this incorrectly the first time. I didn't go through that innermost opening on the tri-glide, but this is corrected, and now you can see we have something that matches how it looks on the other side. Now is when we want to get the ALICE frame centered on that plastic stiffener on the hip belt. And so again, we want roughly 3/8 of an inch on each side, a gap between the outside of the plastic stiffener and the outside of the ALICE frame in this area. And so when we feel like we have it positioned where we want it, we can go ahead and start tightening up those straps. We're going to check to make sure we're centered on both sides. And in this case, I ended up getting it pretty close to right in the center from the get-go. But I'm just going to illustrate, if I didn't have it centered, what I would do is loosen the tighter side. So the side that's closer, if I say have no gap or maybe a 1/4 inch gap on one side, maybe a 1/2 inch gap on the other side, I would loosen the strap that's on the closer side and then tighten the straps that were on the farther side so I can position the ALICE frame back in the center. At this point, we should have some light side-to-side play, not too much, and we are again going to make sure that the belt is centered where we want it. If we're in the correct position, we can then take those same 4 horizontal straps on the hip belt and route them back through the plastic ladder locks, just as if we were attaching them to a FILBE frame. So I'm going to go through that farthest rearmost opening on the ladder lock and then back through the front one, like so. And then we could pop the end of that webbing out through that large oval loop on the ALICE frame. We'll repeat this for all 4 straps. Again, just back through the ladder lock as normal, but they don't need to be tight at this point. Free webbing in to out. And from here, we want to just grab one webbing strap on each side of the frame and just snug them tight at the same time. I'm then going to flip the frame around and tug each strap individually, bracing against the frame to make sure it's as tight as possible. We want to make sure it's tight both through the ladder lock and the tri-glide. And if we've done this correctly now, the frame should have absolutely no play side to side and should have just a little bit. It's going to have play up and down no matter what. It should be a little bit difficult to move when it's in this position if it's adequately tight. Just keep in mind that when you're wearing the pack, it's going to push the hip belt up on the frame as such. Especially if you're using the hip belt, it's just going to push it in this direction. So effectively, the frame is going to sink down on the hip belt when the hip belt's used. From here, we can take the free webbing ends that we used to tighten the hip belt down, pull them back through those oval loops on the ALICE frame, and tuck them behind this center pad on the FILBE hip belt. This isn't a necessary step, but it is nice just to keep these straps out of the way and clean them up. Finally, we can take the center horizontal strap. This is going to go through 2 oval loops, just like the first strap that we fastened did, that vertical strap that we just fastened to itself. It's going to get attached in the same way that one did. It's going to go over, in this case, it's going to go over the center vertical stay on the ALICE frame. And then just like last time, it goes through those 2 loops and then back through one single loop. There's not a lot of slack in this one, so you just want to make sure to feed that through slowly and just grab a little bit of the end. And then like before, feed some of that slack through and then just pull it through the other side instead of just trying to pull it through both those loops at the same time. You want to be feeding it and then pulling it. The strap does not need to be tight. We're just snugging it up, mostly to keep it out of the way. With that step completed, we now have our hip belt attached to our ALICE frame. We will now begin the process of attaching the shoulder harness to the frame. We're going to start by removing the quick release lower half straps from the shoulder harness. We can do this by just pulling up the latch on the female side of the MQRB, otherwise known as the quick release. Bringing the ALICE frame to the center here, I'm going to take one of these lower half straps and I'm going to find the twisted loop at the bottom. I'm then going to make sure that the strap is untwisted and that the buckle is facing away from the frame. It's then going to go through this hole in the lower portion of the ALICE frame behind the hip belt, and we're going to come up from like bottom to top through this twisted loop. And then we're going to pull it snug. Once it's pulled snug, you'll be able to hold the buckle up away from the frame like we had it before, and you'll see no twists in the webbing. We're then going to repeat that procedure on the opposite side, making sure the buckle's away from the frame, that the twisted loop is going through the hole in the ALICE frame from front to back, and then making sure we're feeding the buckle through the twisted loop from bottom to top. With the quick release lower half straps attached, we can now take our two side release buckle straps. We're going to have them face up like this with the tri-glide at the top. And these are going to be attached at the top of the Alice frame through these two oval loops where the Alice shoulder straps are traditionally attached. We're going to start with these face up like so. We're going to feed the angle cut end through that oval loop, through the closest opening on that tri-glide, and then the farthest, just like we did on the hip belt. And now we're going to double back. So we're going to go back through that first opening that we went through with the angled cut webbing end. And we're going to pull that tight like so. This doesn't need to be tight to the frame. We just want it a little bit snug. We do want to make sure that we're doubling back through with the webbing like shown. Otherwise, the strap will slip off this frame when it's in use. Those two buckles are going to be where our load lifter straps on our shoulder harness are anchored once we're finished assembling everything. I'm now going to bring the shoulder harness back into view, and we're going to prepare to attach the harness adapter, this part here. First, we're going to make sure that the shoulder harness is properly configured. We want all of the straps to be loosened as shown, the lower ones and those horizontal straps in the center. The straps at the top can actually be fastened through like so. So if I didn't already have them in the correct configuration, this is the same as all the other ones, through two double loops, then back through one loop. These don't need to be tight. We just want them a little bit snug. We're just keeping these straps out of the way because they're not going to be used during the assembly of the shoulder harness to the frame. With those straps out of the way, we can take our harness adapter, and it doesn't matter which way this goes up. The side with the fold facing down looks a little better, but what we're going to do is slide these large rectangular oval rings around those two smaller oval rings on each side of the shoulder harness. The purpose of the harness adapter is to keep these straps from, if you look here, you can see there's row and stitching on each side. Those oval rings are tied into the harness with just a single row of stitching through one layer of Cordura. And so the harness adapter prevents those two straps from being pulled out of the harness. They're not designed to be stressed in that direction. Normally the frame handles that load. In this case, we add that harness adapter to prevent that load being transferred to those straps on the shoulder harness. We can now position the shoulder harness on the frame. We can find what height we want to set it at. We do have an option of setting it at various heights on the frame. So the maximum height of the shoulder harness is going to be the bottom of the tube that's at the top of the Alice frame. So you can't push it all the way to the very top. It has to line up with the bottom of that tube at the top of the frame. Anyone who's above about 5'7" will probably want the shoulder harness at the very top. Anyone who's shorter can move the harness down and get a better fit with the shoulder straps so they're not too long. To determine whether the shoulder harness can be attached in a particular position, we're going to want to make sure these two areas on the shoulder harness below these webbing channels are free and visible from the back. What I mean by that is in this position, I can see these two channels. I can attach the harness here. If I move it down, I can still see those two areas. I can attach it there. I cannot attach it here because that horizontal bar is blocking those two areas, and so they're obstructed. You just have to make sure you watch where that horizontal bar is. You're either going to attach the horizontal straps above or below that area. We're now going to attach those two fixed horizontal straps on the shoulder harness to the Alice frame. We're going to move those vertical straps out of the way. And then we're going to position the shoulder harness just so that it's above the top of the frame with those two horizontal straps just below the top. What we're going to do is feed these horizontal straps through their respective oval loops. They don't need to be tight. At this point, what we're going to end up doing is sliding the shoulder harness down. And at that point, when it slides down, we want them tight. But in this case, we just want to position them so there's roughly 2 inches of webbing, maybe, going through those oval loops. We'll work to make sure that it's tight enough and also that the harness is centered after we get these secured and we move the shoulder harness down. So I'm taking up the slack just like I did with the other ones before I pull it through. And now I'm going to move the shoulder harness down on the frame. And at this point, it doesn't matter what height it goes to. We're just going to pull it down far enough so that those straps are fully tensioned So you do want to move it several inches down on the frame. And then we can see here, the left side, there's too big of a gap. The right side, there's less of a gap, so the shoulder harness is not centered. So in this case, what I'm going to do is loosen the side where the shoulder harness is too close to the frame and tighten the straps on the side where the shoulder harness was farther away. And then we're going to move the shoulder harness back down and recheck to see whether it's centered and also whether it's tight enough. So we can see here, it's actually kind of hard to see from the back. Let me flip this over and see if I can show it to you better. But the shoulder harness is in the center at this point. You can see roughly the same amount of the tubes on the side of the frame on each side of the shoulder harness. So this is centered. Flipping the frame back over, we want to make sure that these two straps that we just tightened are properly tensioned. We want them effectively as tight as we can get them. It's really hard to over tighten these. It is easy to under tighten them. And we also want to make sure that the webbing isn't sticking up sideways like that. We want to make sure that it's parallel with the webbing underneath it, not out at an angle. We want to make sure that it's straight. We also want to make sure that our harness adapter is roughly centered between those two rows of stitching that hold those horizontal straps in place. So we can see 1 and 2 there. We just want to make sure, bump the camera, sorry about that. We want to make sure that those rows of stitching are on the outside of those large rectangular oval loops on the harness adapter. You can now check to see what height the shoulder harness should be attached at for your torso length. You can do that by fastening these load lifter straps to the side release buckle straps that we added to the top of the frame. Just clip them together, and then you could put the frame assembly onto your back with the hip belt over your hips, and then check the length of the shoulder straps to see whether they're going to be too long or too short. It does work better if we have the horizontal strap that we're going to add in the next step on the frame. But if you're right around 5'7" and not sure if you're going to have the shoulder harness all the way up at the top of the frame or lower down, you can go ahead and check that in this step. You won't be able to, put the pack on with any significant weight or anything, but you will be able to at least get a rough idea of where the shoulder harness should be for your torso length. So just make sure those load lifter straps and the buckles are attached, and then position so the hip belt is centered on your hips. And then you can make small adjustments to the height of the shoulder harness to make sure these shoulder straps are appropriately long or short as you need them for the hip belt to be centered over your hips. In this case, I know I'm going to have the shoulder harness at its uppermost position, so I'm going to go ahead and disconnect these two load lifter straps and then slide the shoulder harness up so it matches up with roughly the bottom of the tube on the top of the Alice frame. Make sure those buckles are out of the way. And then I'm going to grab 3 parts, my horizontal strap, not the angled one, just the standard one, and then 1 ladder lock and 1 tri-glide. Starting with the horizontal strap, this strap has 3 bar tacks in it, which makes it easier to identify. And also, again, the end is not angled cut. This is going to get wrapped around one of the outer tubes on the Alice frame. We're going to set this with the fold side visible, facing up. And then we're going to take the free end of the strap, route it underneath that tube, take the free end through the oval loop like so. Then we can take our tri-glide and slide it on just like this onto the webbing. We're going to position it between these 2 bar tacks here. So we can just slide it down like so. And we just want to make sure it's between them. It doesn't have to be exactly in the center. Anywhere between those 2 bar tacks is fine. Then we can take our ladder lock, and on that uppermost slot that's free there, we're going to run the end of our webbing through. We're going to move that free strap back through our tri-glide, just like we did to get it on the webbing. And once we route it through that back bar, we're just going to make sure that the bar tack at the very end of the strap is close to the tri-glide, roughly in that position. It doesn't have to be precise. We just want it behind that bar. Next, we're going to take our angled horizontal strap. This is going to get routed over the opposite outer frame tube. Again, fold side up. Webbing goes underneath the tube and then back up through the oval loop, just like the other one. And with the shoulder harness at its uppermost position, we want these 2 horizontal straps just above that horizontal bar that's on the frame. And with both straps in approximately the correct position, we can run that angle cut end through the furthermost slot on that ladder lock, and then through that closer slot. And once we get that angle cut end through, we can snug it down. We can position the strap just above the top of that horizontal bar on the frame, and then go ahead and crank this down. You really want this as tight as you can get it. I know there are going to be some guys who are buff enough to be able to pull this strap such that it ends up deforming the frame. You don't want to pull it that tight. You want it as tight as you can reasonably get it, but don't tighten it to a point where you're damaging anything. The horizontal strap assembly keeps the shoulder harness from pushing through the frame and making contact with that vertical bar that's in the center. It just helps hold the lower portion of the shoulder harness in position. And with that attached, we can go ahead and take these two straps that are at the bottom of the shoulder harness, these two vertical straps. They're going to get routed over the top of that horizontal strap assembly and then through this webbing channel, just like that. And we're going to repeat that on the opposite side. We can then take the two corresponding oval loops and the angle cut end, route it through like we've done many times before. This is one of the instances where we really want to emphasize pulling the slack through the buckle like this, not trying to do it like this because it's very difficult to tighten, but making sure we have slack and then just pulling that slack through the top just like this. You can hold it down with your thumb and then take the free end and pull it tight. Both of these straps we want as tight as we can get them. They end up providing extra tension on the horizontal straps up here that we tightened earlier. So making sure these are very snug is critical to helping ensure that the harness stays at the correct height and is appropriately stable on the frame. We can then position those two free strap ends underneath the horizontal bar on the ALICE frame before we proceed to the next step. We can now take our vertical straps, these two guys here, and attach them to the bottom of the ALICE frame. These are going to get attached through these two slots at the bottom of the frame. So with the ladder lock facing up, like so, our twisted loop bottom is going to go through front to back that slot in the ALICE frame. We're going to slide the tri-glide and ladder lock through that twisted loop and then pull it tight and make sure that that webbing is not twisted. We're going to repeat that on the other side. Then we can take those angle cut vertical straps from the shoulder harness and route them through the tri-glides on the top of these vertical straps. From this position, make sure there's no twist. We're going to take that angle cut end, put it through the upper slot on the tri-glide, and then route it through that lower slot. We're going to slide the tri-glide so it's just below that horizontal bar on the ALICE frame with just a little bit of a gap, 1/4 inch or so. And then just like we did with the side release buckle straps, we're going to take that angle cut end and run it back through the tri-glide so it's locked into place and can't slide. We'll repeat that same procedure on the opposite side. Next, we can check to see whether the shoulder harness is at the correct height. So flipping the frame over, we can see the top of the shoulder harness is roughly lined with the bottom of that tube that's at the top of the ALICE frame. We can see there's not a gap there. It's pretty much right where we want it. If we did want to make any adjustments to the shoulder harness height, we can move that horizontal strap assembly up and down just to fine tune the position of the harness. We can tighten both of the vertical straps if we're happy with the shoulder harness position. And we want to tighten these straps just enough to start to pull the top of the shoulder harness down from the top of the frame. We do want to make sure the shoulder harness is pulled down a slight amount. So if we flip this back over, you can see that we now can see a gap between that tube and the top of the shoulder harness. That is good. The shoulder harness is going to stretch up slightly when it's under load, like so, which means we want those vertical straps tightened such that the shoulder harness is actually a little bit below the height that we want it set to. And so we can make fine adjustments by pulling these straps tighter. We want them basically as tight as we can get them without pulling the shoulder harness too far below the top of the frame. You can see I'm continuing to add tension like so, continuing to bump the camera ever so often. And now we can see we got a little bit more of a gap. It's a little bit over 1/8 of an inch maybe. That's roughly where we want it, somewhere between 1/8 and 3/16 of an inch from the top of the frame. Then we'll attach the load lifter straps. We want to make sure that we don't attach them to the female buckles that are on the top of the shoulder harness. These can actually be cut off entirely if we never plan to use them again. We have that ability. We want to make sure we fasten them to those side release buckle straps that we added. And then we could just snug the straps down or tighten them all the way if you don't intend to actually adjust them during use. We can then take the male buckles on the quick release lower half straps. We can make sure that they're not twisted, and we can just push them in to the MQRB buckles that are on the shoulder straps. Usually you can just push them in like that. It might take a little force, or if you're attaching them, you can just pull up on that latch on the female side, push the buckle in, and release the latch. That completes assembly of the shoulder harness only portion of the kit, plus the addition of the hip belt. If you have just the shoulder harness kit, your frame is assembled and ready for use. To finish assembly of the complete FILBE Main Pack system, we're going to take our 2 bag attachment straps, along with the FILBE bag's 2 lower compression straps, and the main bag itself. Setting aside the main bag and lower compression straps for now, I'm going to take one of the bag attachment straps and demonstrate away from the frame how to attach it. So it's going to get attached through that same slot where we attached our quick release lower half straps, just like that. But this is going to go through the frame. It's going to wrap around the top of the frame. I'll show you where that is later. But that metal oval loop is going to go through the plastic rectangular loop, and it's going to get pushed back like that. So that's the attachment that we're going to make on the inside of the frame. So the metal loop is going to go through that attachment point where the shoulder straps were attached. And then the plastic loop is going to go between the metal tube of the frame around the top of that lumbar area. And then, just like I demonstrated away from the frame, we're going to put that oval loop through the plastic ring. I'm going to speed this up. It is a little bit tricky to get this through, especially if the webbing starts to fold over at all. So you want to make sure to try to keep the webbing as flat as possible so the ring goes through easily, or the loop goes through the plastic ring. And then once that's through that loop, just like that, we can push the oval loop through that same hole that we started through, and it's just going to peek out a very small amount. And that bag attachment strap is anchored inside that hole because of the plastic ring. The plastic ring is not able to fit back through, only the oval loop is, and that gives us the proper amount of distance away from the frame that we want that oval loop to be at. We're going to repeat that same procedure on the opposite side. Metal loop through the hole, plastic ring over the top of that angled piece that makes up the lumbar area on the frame. Metal loop through the plastic ring. And then the oval loop back out through that same hole that we went through the first time. This is a better shot of that oval loop through the plastic ring. And then I'm just going to push that loop out. And in this case, I actually had the webbing folded over near the end where that oval loop is, which often happens when you're trying to push it through that plastic ring. So I pushed it back through the frame, fixed the webbing, and then pushed it back out. We can then grab the FILBE lower compression straps, and we're going to face the buckles towards us and pointed upward like so towards the frame. We're going to make sure we don't twist the webbing anywhere, and we're going to take that twisted loop at the very end. It's going to go over the top of the frame and down, and then we could push both of the male buckles through that twisted loop and pull it tight. We can then move the male buckle that's closest to the frame up against the bottom of the frame because it's going to attach to the bag at this point. And then we'll repeat the procedure on the opposite side. Buckles pointed upward towards the bottom of the frame, over the top, both male buckles through, pull tight, move that male buckle up, Now we can grab the main pack and slide it onto the frame. I'm going to pull the frame out of view for a second here and then bring in the main bag. The frame is going to slot in to the frame sleeve at the top of the main bag, just like it would on a standard FILBE frame. In this instance, though, we're going to take I'm just going to loosen these load lifter straps real quick, and then I'm going to make sure that the side release buckles that we attach to the top of the frame are sticking up, and the load lifter buckles on the shoulder harness itself are both facing down. Those are going to stay in that frame sleeve when we slide the frame up, and that ensures that we're not going to get the load lifter buckles mixed up when we're attaching our load lifter straps up there. So now we can attach those two load lifter straps to our side release buckle straps. We can snug down the load lifter straps like so, and then we can begin attaching the main bag's different attachment points to the frame. This oval loop that's on the side of the shoulder harness, it may or may not match up with this tab depending on the height of the shoulder harness. In its highest position, it will match up, and so we'll go ahead and attach it there. We'll repeat that on the other side. If this doesn't line up or you have to reach slightly to get it in there, just skip it. It's not necessary. Further down the frame, we have these two double oval loops that each have a strap with it. This strap, you want to make sure it's routed behind our vertical straps, not over. You don't want it pulling on that strap like so. We want it to come out like this. Both of these straps are going to get fastened just slightly snug. We want to make sure that there's not a ton of tension between the two straps in the fabric. So when we tighten both these down, there should just be, let me see if I can demonstrate it. There should just be, I'm going to tighten this one up a little bit more. Okay, there should just be a little bit of tautness in that fabric. We don't want to pull it crazy tight like so. We don't want to you don't want to be pulling those two attachment points apart. We just want a little bit of tension in that area. And then we can route the free ends of those straps behind the vertical straps to help keep them in place. Moving down the frame, the lowermost yib-yab tab, as they call them, on the pack bag itself is going to go through that bag attachment strap oval loop. It's just going to go just like you're seeing from back to front, just like we did with the shoulder harness loop or that first tab that was going through the one oval loop on the side of the shoulder harness if we had the shoulder harness at the correct height to attach it through. We want to make sure that the oval loop is not, crazy twisted or anything, but as long as that tab is through the loop, you probably did it correctly. Finally, we're going to fasten the lower compression straps to the bag. If we look up underneath the bag here, you can see that there's a female side release buckle under there. That's going to be attached to that male buckle that we moved closer to the frame earlier when we attached that lower compression strap. We're going to do this on both sides. Just find that buckle that's underneath there and snap in the corresponding male buckle on the compression strap. Pull both those straps as tight as you can get them. And then we're going to route the male buckle that's on the very end of that compression strap through the frame. So you can see that there's a MOLLE channel slightly above where that first buckle attachment point was. And then we're just going to go through the first row. There's going to be a second row that we want to come through just like this. And then we can, making sure it's not twisted, snap that buckle in to its corresponding female buckle. And as always, we're going to repeat that procedure on the opposite side, up through the first channel, up through the second channel, and then into that side release buckle. That completes assembly of the full FILBE main pack system to an ALICE frame. Just going back over our attachment points real quick, we have at the top the frame sleeve, then we have that tab, which may or may not be fastened. We have those two straps in the middle. We have our lowermost tab on each side of the pack bag, right there. And finally, we have the two lower compression straps that are going from the frame right underneath there, connected to the main pack. And that concludes assembly of the complete FILBE-to-ALICE adapter kit, and the pack is now ready for use. There are two differences when attaching the kit to a Eureka Molding PALICE frame instead of a standard ALICE frame. We're going to go over the installation of the vertical straps here. These vertical straps get attached in almost the same manner as to the standard ALICE frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the ladder lock up with our tri-glide up at the top, like so. We're going to take the twisted loop at the bottom, and it's going to run through the bottom loop on the Eureka molding frame from the back towards the front, like so. We're then going to pass the ladder lock and tri-glide through that twisted loop. And we want to make sure now to pull the twisted loop all the way to the frame. So you can see I'm actually tucking the twisted loop down into that slot on the frame and then continuing to pull that strap tight. Repeating on the opposite side, I'm going to feed that twisted loop from back to front through the slot, ladder lock and tri-glide, go through the twisted loop, and then making sure to feed the twisted loop all the way against the frame like so and pulling them up. Both of the vertical straps are going to go over that lower horizontal bar that's a few inches above the bottom of the frame, and then otherwise are going to get attached as they did for the standard ALICE frame. If you're attaching a complete FILBE Main Pack system to a P-ALICE frame, the two bag attachment straps are going to be attached as such. Taking one of our bag straps, we're going to feed the metal oval loop through the frame from the inside to the outside through that same slot that the quick release lower half straps are attached through. That oval loop is then going to feed through the plastic ring. The plastic ring is going to wrap around the bottom of the frame, and the oval loop is just going to slot through it as we did for the standard ALICE frame. We're going to repeat that on the opposite side. Oval loop through the frame from inside to outside, plastic ring over the bottom of the frame, oval loop through plastic ring. All other procedures for attaching the kit to the P-ALICE frame are identical to the standard frame.